Sean.
Dad, Ryan got shot.
Perhaps you can help me. I'm looking for my son, Ryan Quinn.
Your son?
Y'all waiting for somebody?
Yeah, shouldn't be too long.
I don't like him checking us out like that.
Neither do I.
The feds moved Ryan. Send the boys out to find him.
It's not often I get to speak with Hollywood royalty. How are you today?
Oh, isn't that nice of you to say, Mark? That's a nice way to introduce me. My producing partner, who's actually produced Mercy, actually kind of invented the whole thing. He was an amazing energy. His name is Stephen Paul, and he always introduces me as, and this is Academy Award winner Jon Voight, who says that every time, anybody, family members.
Well, that
I'm
is
so grateful for the fact that anybody introduces me with any honors. It's great.
Well, then you are going to love this introduction that I'm about to do for you. Yes, it was a well-earned Oscar for Coming Home, as was the Golden Globe nominations you've won over the years as well. But hi, everybody. This is Mark Chaffardini with the Go See Talk podcast experience. Thank you so much for coming back to the podcast. We are thrilled beyond belief to speak to an American legend, a cinema legend, American actor, a national treasure, if you will. Joe Buck himself is here joining us, Mr. Jon Voight. How are you today?
Hey, I'm great, Mark. That was so nice. What a nice introduction. Fantastic.
Well, I'm here in lovely Dallas, Texas. You've played two very well-known Texas people, at least in your career. You know, I've heard and I've noticed, though, being a fan over the years, you craft a specific dialect, a different way of speaking for every role. When did that first of all, is that true? And when did that first become a staple in your life?
More or less, that's true. I don't know. I grew up in Yonkers, New York. My father was a golf professional. I had a nice family, my very noble parents. And my dad had a great sense of humor. He was a wonderful fellow. And we used to watch Sid Caesar, this show of your show of shows with Carl Reiner and Imogen Coca and Howard Morris. And we would watch that. And the people who wrote that show were Mel Brooks, Neil Simon, Woody Allen, greatest comic, geniuses of my lifetime. And they did this show with Sid Caesar. And Sid Caesar did all of these accents. And my father, both my grandfathers had accents from different places. And I loved accents from the time I was a little kid. So I would impersonate Sid Caesar, who did this German idiot. And I would go to my classmates on the Monday after that Saturday, and I would do these imitations for their entertainment. And that's how I guess I got to be, I grew toward acting. And I always feel very comfortable when I have an accent. So that's that. But recently I've done some roles that are just me, and I'm hoping that they're going to survive. And I feel very uncomfortable when it's just me,
Well, speaking of accents, the Irish one that you play in Mercy, it's a tough one to pull off, and so convincingly without it falling into some sort of weird parody. But it's very similar to what you did with Anaconda playing Paul or Manny in Runaway Train. It's so distinct, and you really commit to it. But did you take this because you got to do something interesting to it?
Well, I found the piece to be interesting. I thought we could do something with it, and I got the opportunity to work with Jonathan Rhys Meyers for the second time, and I really looked forward to that because he's a brilliant actor. In this part, he's really sensational in this part. I'm very impressed with his work here. So it was that was what drew me to it, and I got to meet Leah, and I thought she would be great in this part, and she is. And anyway, so. Yeah, that's all I have to say about that, Mark.
Well, playing Patrick Quinn, he comes across as he's cool and reserved, but that he has the ferocity to unleash at any time. Yet the whole movie is about him trying to keep a leash on his sons, on his dogs.
Right.
So how was the dynamic between you and Jonathan to where he could fly off the handle, but you had to come into the more reserved and conservative, so to speak?
Well, we worked on that part. It wasn't written in. There was no depth to this initially in the first drafts of this piece. And we together influenced it toward that. And then when we were in the process of acting it, I remember saying to the director, young fellow, first time directing, a very good, very talented fellow. I said, well, we've worked out this much of it. And Jonathan was out of the country, was going to come in at a certain point. And I said, we got that much. I said, when Jonathan comes in, it's going to change. I said, he's going to bring his own dynamic here. And so we've left room for that. I've left room in my head for it. I know I'm going to be very flexible. I'm not in love with anything. If Jonathan needs something, we're going to do it. Anyway, that's the way I felt about his talent and his focus, artistic focus on things.
Mm-hmm.
Sure enough, he came into the set and he did. He really has a tremendous energy, and he said, well, do this and I'll do this. Well, I'll just do this. Exactly right, John. So, and I was there for him, but also it took me into a place where I had to respond to this stuff, and I had my own design, you know? So he fit perfectly, but I knew going in that he would. I knew he would be terrific in this case. But anyway, I really love his performance in this, and I have a great respect for my own too.
Speaking specifically to the ferocity of your role and what you both brought to it, there's a pivotal scene at the end where you confront each other, and there's some slapping and some punching. So how you very simply give him a smack. So how did that work? I mean, was that part of the script, and how did you work that on set?
Well, I don't want to tell too much about those things, because let the audience feel it. You know, it's a surprise when it happens, isn't it? It comes out of the blue in a way. But he says something about my wife and his journey, and I've had it. You see what I mean? All throughout the film. So right there, I mean, but John, that's the deal with John and I. There's no concern about, you know, he'll suggest things to me even, you know, like the cigarette. He had a cigarette in the scene. He said, knock that out of my hand, my mouth. Great. And I said, you got it. That's it. So I went, get that thing on. What the? Like that, you know what I mean? He gave me that. And then when I came to that scene, the other scene, I suggested the blocking. I said, I'm going to slap you. And I said, then you take a couple of shots at me. Boom, boom. And then I'll finish you off. Boom. You know, and we did it. Became very violent. But we're both pretty good at athletic things, even though I'm of my age. But he's got great gifts, this guy. He's got great gifts musically as well. And sometimes that plays into a performance because he musically knows how to do things verbally, timing and stuff like that. He's just fantastic. And then I take this guy and I grab him and I say to him, this is the way we're talking on camera, right? We didn't have too much time to do the scene. I said, I'll hit you and I'll knock you back toward this pillar. Then I'll take your head and I'll bang it against this pillar, right? He said nothing in response to what I said. In other words, he didn't say anything. It was okay, right? So we get into this scene, and we're going to do this improvisationally way. But this is the way we set it up. And I said, I don't need a whole lot of things, tricks and this and that. And we said, let's do this thing, bing. You know, out of nowhere it happens. So I slap him. I said, don't talk about your mother that way. Whatever I say to him, you know, don't want you to keep your, whatever I say, your mouth shut. And then he boom, and he hits me And then he hits me again, and then I just take 2 shots in the nose, you know. And then I just whack him, and it blows him back. He did something. I mean, this is just a stunt, right? But I so appreciated what he could do. He took that punch properly. A lot of actors don't know how to do that kind of stuff. He took it like and he puts blood in his mouth and spits like I almost, you know, knocked the tooth out. And then I go over and I grab him by the head and I put his, you know, head against the pillar. And I know that I'm not going to do that. He's got to do it. Do you see? And we're doing it without any tricks. There's no padding there for him to whack his head against. It's a wall. It's cement. So he's got to cleverly do that so it looks real. So I grab the back of his head, but I let him, and this was all instinctual, by the way. I didn't tell him to do this. He didn't talk me through it. He could have had some idiot grab his head and really, you know, hurt him. But I know what I'm doing that way. So he did it, and the way he did and I took his head back, but I didn't, I'm just following him. He's leading me. We did this all instinctually. We did it right on the set. First take. And he leans his head back, and he's so flexible physically. His body arched all the way back. And then he took his head, and so it was almost like a ballet. And he did it so perfectly. And then I take it and I say, throw him out of. Anyway, it was so special. I don't know 2 other people who would have done it the same way, in a sense. And I certainly don't know anybody like Jonathan who had that ability, right?
Mm-hmm.
Great physical ability. But that's only a part of his intensity as a performer, is all this, you know, this is just real talent.
Yeah.
And the ability to bring forth the emotions that he has. Anyway, that's my description. That's it.
Well, that speaks to both of your strengths as performers, to be able to play off each other. And like you said, you did it in one take. I mean, just you throwing your shoulder in the screen, I almost flinched. And we're not even in the same room with each other. It just made me feel so special to be here. But you know, you played a series of villains over the years, and I think what was crucial about your selection of roles is that you make them sympathetic. And I'm curious if you can think back to a time where you realized, hey, I'm starting to get more of a villain role, or more of a heavy, and what about making somebody sympathetic is important to you?
Well, it's a matter of taking people on a journey, allowing them to feel for you, to see your vulnerability. That's what makes them, you know what I mean? If you're hurting in a film, really hurting, people are going to feel for you. And I think I'm good at playing suffering souls. That's what I think I'm good at. And that's who I think I play. Even the other kinds of roles, I play people who are suffering. Anyway, and that's something it gets to something who I am, I think. This is getting to be pretty heavy, Mark. What happened when you were 3 years old? Just tell me. I won't tell anybody. Tell me.
If you're only going to get one shot with the great Jon Voight, we have to go heavy. Otherwise, I would just ask you to yell at me like Bud Kilmer for 10 minutes, and I think we'd have a great time. Well, you've worked with Tony Scott, you've worked with Michael Mann, you've worked with Brian De Palma, and they come to you because of the stature, because of your what you've done in your career. How do they look to you? I mean, how do you inform your character where, you know, you just talked about doing a scene with John, but how do you, or doing a voice, but how do you really look at something on the script, or take director's dialogue or input and say, you know what, I really feel I should do it this way? When does John become the actor?
Well, our business is collaborative. It is, you know, we learn to depend on each other, and the people who do it all up on their own are lesser. They can't get to the heights. You can't get to the heights just doing it alone.
Mhm.
I don't think. So, and it's a give and take, and it's a family too. I mean, you have to work with other people, many other people. The good pictures that I've been part of some very good films. There's a camaraderie in the cast, and a support. We support each other if we're doing it right.
Well, let's go back to Mercy for a little bit. I'd like to also know how you have fun on set, because I think for Patrick Quinn to be introduced on the golf course is a pretty fitting entry point for you. It's a way of sort of it belies who the character is. It sort of gives a false impression of who somebody is. But how do you have fun on the set when you know something might be heavy for the day, or the subject matter might be really dour?
Well, I think, when the big challenges come, when you have a big scene, you have to, it's almost like you have to be playful. You have to allow yourself to examine it, to not be constantly trying to work the heaviness out. I believe that that you have to, in order to you have to be fresh when you do that stuff. It comes from a certain kind of vitality, and being light is a way to keep that vitality for those scenes, actually. So you can kid around, but underneath you're examining everything. You're watching this and watching that, and preparing and breathing properly, and then you're going into the unknown. I saw a thing very recently. I saw a little clip of Robin Williams talking about how he goes into this unknown area, and that's what he lives to do, to go in and take a flight and not know where it's going to land, with his marvelous improvisations. That's where he lived, opening his mouth and going into it and seeing where it took him, like Jonathan Winters and all those guys. But that's very extreme stuff. You see that with good acting. I think it's in that same realm, that you go in not knowing how you're going to come out. Maybe that's too much to say, but that's the secret.
Well, talking about being aware and going into the unknown, if you can go back to, there's a scene in Midnight Cowboy where you and Dustin Hoffman are walking through New York City, and you walk past a horse where Dustin Hoffman sort of puts his hand out like, "Get away from me, horse." But you, being from Texas, instinctively like put your hand out and say, "Hi, horse." Was that scripted? Was that you trying to,
No, that's just it's the actor's imagination at work, playing the character. I've seen a lot of horses and stuff like that. So why wouldn't I like horses? You know what I mean? He's much more comfortable with horses than with people, Joe Buck. So, but he's not a great horseman or anything like that. But he's a farm boy, He's around that time.
Well, I think what I was getting at, it's just those little tangible bits that may make you show a little more about a character without them saying something. And I think that your ability to emote or look or cast a glance it's in keeping with how great you are at portraying your roles. So.
You can certainly do that work. When I work with a guy like Dusty Hoffman, and like Rhys Meyers, for that kind of work, when I'm working with Dusty, it's such a joy. It's a great joy to be, working with that kind of talent. And I've been very fortunate. I've worked with so many very talented people on successful pieces that achieved something. And that's that's a big blessing that I've had in my life, to have done something with spectacular, talented people around me to help me and to work with, and then to see the work affecting other people so that they enjoy something or have an insight into something. It's a marvelous aspect, a very big blessing.
Well, I feel very blessed to be speaking with you, and I was hoping for just one more question. Can you tell me what the words "don't afraid" mean to you?
Oh, that's a good one. Mark, where'd you get that?
I got it from an interview with you, but I just wanted to hear more about it. I think it's phenomenal.
Okay, so this is from me to me.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, that Andrei Konchalovsky is the man who did Runaway Train, who directed Runaway Train. Andrei Konchalovsky, I got to know, I don't know through whom, maybe Shirley MacLaine. Although I don't know Shirley very well, I think at one point she suggested that I meet Andrei Konchalovsky. Don't know how it was, but I helped him in some ways at a certain point in his career because he was a Russian filmmaker. And I saw several of his films, one being Siberiad, which is like the Gone with the Wind of Russia or something. Wonderful piece, magnificent. It's kind of genius level piece. And I befriended him, as I say, I helped him get some help to get a film done in the States at that time, which was pretty difficult. But then he gets this movie and he comes to me and he says, would you do it? You know? So I had an experience working on a role that I didn't succeed in, and I went back to work on it again. And I realized that I had to really dive in and change myself entirely to do this role. And so it was a failure initially on stage, and then I took it to Buffalo, New York, and I tried it again with my own little, so I could work on it, right? Did all this work, this animal thing that I needed to put into the performance. Then I get offered this role, Runaway Train. And I knew, as soon as I saw what had to be done, I knew this was very far from me, and I had to really go after it. I really had to do something different. I had to become this person. And how am I going to find it? So I went in search of this character, right? And I came up with a makeup. It helped with this fellow who I worked with, but I said, how about if his eye, we pull some skin over so his eye is damaged like that? How about this? How about that? Right? I did real work on it. And I did padding for it. And I was very thin at that time. I'd almost killed myself with this diet that I given. And I had padding to do the role. And I had this character that I worked on. And I know exactly where I found it and all this stuff, right? I went through a whole process, and I auditioned it for Andrei Konchalovsky. And initially he said no, and I did it anyway. I went toward this character anyway. And I finally came up to the set, and I was this other guy. So then I'm in a scene, and I'm doing a certain thing in the scene. And I think Rebecca De Mornay said, we're going to be killed. If we stay on this train, we're going to be killed. You see, you don't understand. And my response was, then we better do something about it. You see, the way I said it was, then we better do something about it. Like that. It's crazy, right? And it was something like that, where I had that moment of madness within the character. I'd express it. And I did this thing. And Andre said, as a direction, and very seldom do you remember certain direction. He said, don't afraid, John. Go there, go there. Don't afraid. Don't afraid. He was Russian. If he said, don't be afraid, it wouldn't have had the power. But he said, don't afraid. Don't afraid. Go there, go there. You know? And it was wonderful. What a wonderful direction, encouraging me, saying, you got it. You got the guy, do that. Then we better do something about it. Ooh. Great. Anyway, Andre Conchalas is the best direction I've ever had.
Oh,
Don't be afraid.
phenomenal. I'm keeping that with me. I'm keeping that with me. Mr. Voight, thank you immensely. Humbled beyond belief to be speaking with the great Oscar-winning actor, Jon Voight.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks again.
Thanks.
And again.
Ryan, this family's going down, whether you like it or not.
I had an agreement.
She was just going to hand Ryan back. She's working for the feds. I'm going to ask you once. Where's my brother?